we are having an important conversation this morning about life and death. Loss is something we all have to deal with in this life.
But how we choose to cope and heal could change the rest of how our own lives play out.
Jen McCormick is the clinical director at the Healing Center here in Seattle. Jen works with people who are in grief, but you also study and read a lot about grief and the way that we all process grief.
It's so good to have you here. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It seems that our culture has no problem talking about death and seeing death. We see it in movies, we see it on television, we use it in slang. But when it comes to what's next for people left behind, we're terrible. Why is that?
Yeah, that's true. I think really the main reason is that people think that if, you know, the first thought that goes through someone's head is if this happened to you, it could happen to me. So it's almost like people believe that grief is contagious or that that event could occur to them and they can't fathom that. So it's difficult to support someone. Instead, you want to kind of shy away from that and walk away from that.
It's crazy how many things can impact your grief. Everybody's going to experience grief at some point in their life, whether they're going to acknowledge it or not, because we have relationships with other humans and humans die. It's just a fact of life.
Yes.
But the things that impact us when we're in grief, it's amazing. The season changes, for example. We were talking about the sun coming out for the spring.
Yeah.
That seems like it could be good. Maybe not if you're in grief.
Right. I think a couple of things to think about with the seasons changing, especially with the sun coming out and, you know, the days getting longer, is that a lot of people, you'll see moods brightening all over, especially here in Seattle, where we kind of wait all winter long for the sun to come out. And most people are activated and excited to get outside. But if you're a person that's grieving or, you know, a person who's feeling depression from grief, seeing people around you feel better and feel happier and feel excited about the sun can really emphasize your feelings of depression and grief and almost make it seem even worse than it was before, when you could kind of hide in the winter and in the rain. And another thing to really remember about any season change is that with each new season comes new memories of the person that died. And so you might have special things that you did with your person in the spring or when the sun was out. And you know, going through that season, that cycle again, and realizing that that person is gone and you can't do those things it's really intense. It's really difficult.
Grief is unlike any other emotion we experience. It's not like sadness or happiness or anger where you feel it one moment and then you send it away the next, and then it's not like that. It is constant, and it's constant like a wave. And Travis and I have talked a lot about grief, and I didn't realize it until I went through it myself, that it's not the kind of thing that you feel one moment and then you set it aside and it doesn't come up again unless it's through another situation. How important is it to recognize that grief is not a typical emotion the way that we tackle other things like sadness and happiness? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think in our society we have this formula that you're supposed to grieve for, you know, 6 months to a year and then you're sort of done. And so to remember that that's a fallacy. You know, there is no specific route in which someone sort of resolves grief. That's not really a concept. And to remember that, and to remember that you might go along in your daily life and feel okay sometimes, and then get hit with what we call in the business a grief burst. And so that's when you hear a song or see a place that you haven't seen in a while, or see a person that you associate with the person who died, and you're suddenly hit with that wave that you mentioned. So just knowing that in general everyone's journey is individual in grief, and there's no formula. There's no.
And it's forever.
Yeah.
You don't ever really get to set it aside. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that's I mean, exactly right. It's like figuring out how to live with your grief instead of figuring out how to solve your grief.
Yeah, it's not a problem to be solved. It's something sort of to adapt to over time. I kind of think of it as maybe when you get an injury and you have a cut, and after a while it heals and there's a scar. So you can live with that scar, but it's still there. You still have it.
I think people who have grief maybe back in their life and they never really dealt with it are surprised when things trigger that grief, like the season changing, and they don't really understand what it is that's happening to them. Would you say that it's never too late to sort of dig in and process and really try to discuss your grief, no matter how far in the past your loss is?
Absolutely. I think if something's coming up for you, you know, a lot of times in life we have bad things happen to us, and having someone close to you die is one of those things. And we also have to continue living our lives, and so oftentimes we'll push those things aside and carry on. Unfortunately, those things come back though, and so eventually you do have to kind of face it or deal with it in whatever way that is for you, whatever way works. That might mean talking to someone, it might mean journaling, or whatever your journey is. I think it is important to address it at some point.
How can we be there for people? Because even though we've been through grief, sometimes everybody handles it differently. So sometimes it can be difficult to know how to support someone in that moment when they're having that wave.
Yeah. I think the thing I hear the most is to provide people with sort of concrete, tasks that you will do for them. So sympathy and empathy are amazing and go a long way. And people who are in the midst of grief really need someone to, come in and say, hey, I will cook food for you, or I will take care of your kids for a few hours, or I'll run to the grocery store, or whatever it is that, you can't or don't have the energy to do because you're grieving. So offering those concrete things for people is really helpful.
And even telling folks about the Healing Center, which is why you're here, and an amazing support organization, just absolutely incredible. I mean, it's a place that helped our family, young and old can go there, no matter your type of loss. And y'all are actually holding an annual fundraiser in March on the 10th. It's at noon at the Seattle Westin. Everybody is invited to attend, and it's really about donating and raising money to continue to offer grief support in our community.
Yes, absolutely. Please join us. It's a fun event, and we're completely run by private donations, essentially. So please join and come check us out.
Jen McCormick, thank you so much.
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
it.